So welcome to our Geofolia webinar. It's just on initiating the new cropping year. Some of you know me, so I'm Alice Marland. I'm a Geofolia trainer for Landmark, and obviously we've got Paul with us as well from support. There he is giving everyone a little wave. So yeah, it's just the two of us today, and then we've also got Stephen from Landmark as well, just to come along to have a watch and see what we're doing. So the things that we're going to kind of cover today, we will look at how to kind of close your stocks down or enter a closing stock take for the previous year, starting your new crop rotation, entering the crops into that new rotation, and then if you need to do any updating of field margins or field splits or any other mapping bits, we'll have a look at that as well. And then what you need to do to kind of update or bring across your costings from the previous year, just so you've moved those forward, and then you can edit and kind of take them on. There are no notes to this webinar, but it is being recorded, so if you want to kind of watch it again, you can. I've not actually done a Zoom webinar when the video goes to the cloud, so I don't know if you guys get automatic access to that or if I get an email with a link, but whatever happens, I'll make sure that you've all got access to that recording. I don't know how long it lasts on the cloud, so I'd just quickly check in and have a watch or download if you can, because I don't think it lasts forever. Everyone, I think, is going to be muted throughout this webinar. If you've got any burning questions, you can pop them in the chat. Paul's going to be kind of keeping an eye on that, and then at the end of every section we kind of go over. I'll just make sure that there's nothing urgent that we need to have a look at. And then hopefully at the end we'll have some time for questions, but we'll just see how we get on. But yeah, use the chat because everyone's going to be muted. So I will just share my screen. Right. Okay, can everyone see that? Can everyone see my Geofolia? Okay, perfect. I've got a few nods and thumbs up, so that's good. Okay, I don't know how I get rid of this bar. Can you see this bar along the top of my screen? No? Okay. I'll just bring Geofolia down a little bit. So I can't actually see the tabs at the top of my screen, which is really not very helpful. Okay, so we have come into the crop rotation map screen of Geofolia. My Geofolia set up that whenever I open the program, it comes straight into the crop rotation anyway, because you can do a lot of things from here, so I think that's a nice place to start with. So currently my crop year is 2021. So obviously it'll be the 2022 crop year that we are going to create today. So what we want to do is kind of not shut everything down, because Geofolia doesn't work in a way that once you've opened a new crop year, like the last one, shut down or anything. You can always come back into the previous year and edit any information or have a look at things. So what we will do first is we'll just go and put in, we'll have a look at our stocks and see if we need to put a stock take in or something like that. So whenever I think about stock in Geofolia, I would go up into the inputs tab, and then you can go straight into either an invoice or a stock take, but I would always kind of start off in the input prices and stocks screen. So that is where you can see a list of all the products that you've got in your Geofolia that you've either used or bought in that crop year. So in here, we've got a list of those. What I find quite useful, especially at the end of the year, just to remember that you can sort the columns, so either like A to Z or high to low or vice versa. So I would probably filter or sort my final stock column so you can see what you've actually got in stock. So you would have gone out to the shed, written down what you've got in stock at the end of the year, brought that in, or if you have got the app, you could do this on the app as well. That's another option for you. But yeah, so if you've written down what you've got in the sheds, come back into the office, and then I would just run down your final stock column and make sure everything is right. So yeah, what's actually in the shed is what Geofolia thinks is in the shed. If it isn't correct, you can either, that's a good example, use this stock details tab so you can see what's happened with that product, whether you've used it or bought it. And if you need to edit something in here, just double click on either the activity, the invoice, or the stock take, and then you can go and edit information there if you need to. Or you could go in and put in a stock take just to make sure that your final stock is right, because that final stock for the year the year that's ended will become your initial stock for your new crop year. So to do a stock take, you have got an inputs inventory button at the top. So if we click on that, that brings you into your inputs inventory screen. So you first have the date box. So you would do the date that you actually did this stock take on, because obviously the dates are important when you're working with stock. So if we did that at the end of September, you can give it a name if you want to. So that just helps if you've got a few stock takes. It just kind of helps you see what's what. So and then if you have got more than one farm on your license, obviously just double check that that farm is the right one that you're doing the stock take for. And you can either put those details in the top section of the screen or the bottom, whichever one you do, it will update the other one. So it's just personal preference. Then next, into the inventory details tab. So this is where you're going to enter the products that you need to change and the amounts of. So with Geofolia, there's always more than one way of doing something. So with this, what you can do is if you click into the inputs box, you can just start typing for the product that you want. So we want crystal. So once you've clicked on that, it will say what it is, how much Geofolia thinks it has at the date that you were doing this stock take on. You've then got an actual stock column, so you can put in there that actually we had 2.5 litres and not 2.72. And then the variance column, once you've kind of clicked out, so it kind of updates itself, will show you the difference. If you are going up in value, you will be able to put in a unit price, but because obviously we're taking the stock limit amount down, it doesn't need a price in there. You can then use the green plus on the left hand side to add another one, but if you have got a lot of products that just need editing or changing, what you can do is, I would call this the list button. So it's the one above the plus on the left hand side. If you click on that, it brings up a list of, I mean, we're in a stock take now, so it's bringing up a list of your inputs. So you can go down and you can click on the ones that you want. So we can do and you have on the left-hand side got a filter. So if you want to filter on anything, you can. You just tick or untick what you want to do, and then press apply filter at the bottom. That will then update this list on the right-hand side. So if we OK to that, it has put those other products in our stock take inventory details tab. So actually we've not got any of those products in stock, so we want to leave that actual stock blank, so you can see that it's just left those as 0. So if we save that, that's saved in the system, and then I always do a refresh because we're going to go back to the input prices and stocks page, just to keep everything up to date. So if I filter that back on input, so we can see, so Liberator is one of the things that we've changed. You can see that that 0.03 difference is in the inventory corrections column. So that's where you'll see it. And then if you click on there, you can again see that inventory, double click and edit if needed. So once that is in, I'm going to shut that tab down. So we're back into our crop rotation screen. When you were starting a new crop year, I've just spotted Edward's question, so I'm just going to nip back into the input prices and stocks screen. A new field has been added, which is the end of use date. I can't remember what version it was in, but it's a recent addition. If you see anything on my tables or anything like that, that you haven't got, remember you have got the 3 dots on the right hand side. Those are the columns that you can have on your tables, so you can put a tick in the ones that you want, and then if you want to reorder them, just drag and drop those column headings. So you can kind of just make those table screens, you know, how you want to see them, and just, yeah, it's down to personal preference, and then it just makes more use to you. Okay, so back into crop rotation. Again, with your, like, starting the new crop rotation, there are different ways of kind of getting your data ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this relatively new feature called the next crop. So basically, what you can do before you start your new crop rotation, you can say that what the next crop is going to be, and then you can take that forward into that new year. So what we are going to do, you can do this in the table or in the map, it's completely up to you, but I prefer working in the map screen because it's more visual. So we are going to have all of our winter wheat fields. So I've just put a tick against winter wheat, so that's highlighted them all for me. And we are going to make those spring barley. So because we're doing more than one field at a time, we've got them all highlighted, and then we can use that grouped records button at the top. So if we click on that, normally you could use that for changing the actual crop, but what we want to do now is change the next crop. So if we select that from the drop down, it will then give us a box to then put in our next crop. So if we OK to that, that has updated those. Hopefully, when it's saved. Okay, so that's updated those. If you wanted to do one field at a time, double click on that field. And in the crop tab, you can see the next crop bottom right. So that's where you can see it, or you can add it in there yourself. Okay, so we've done that. You don't have to do that before you start the next rotation. It's just completely down to you. It's just an option for you. So now we're ready to start our 2022 crop year. So if we go to new crop rotation up at the top of the screen, you get this new crop rotation window open. So it will always default to a year in the future. But if you wanted to use this drop down, and you can add and you can go back a year if needed. But we're obviously going into the next year, so that's fine for us. We want to take that forward from the crop rotation. We want that of 2021, but you can take it forward from another year if you would like to. This tick box is quite an important one. So if you leave that ticked, what happens is when you start your 2022 crop year, it will basically copy and paste the cropping across. So it'll take 2021's crops and they will become 2022, and then you can go and edit them from there. So if you've got a lot of things in your rotation that don't change, it can be quite nice, especially if they're not perennial things from a Geofolia point of view. It can be quite nice to take them all forward, and then you're only changing what has changed in that year, rather than you know, kind of putting everything in from scratch, really. Because we are using that next crop function, we don't want that to happen, because otherwise it doesn't bring those next crops over. So we are going to untick that. And then if you had unticked that and not used the next crop function, you would literally just get a whole lot of white fields been taken over. I would ignore this sectors option. That's more from a France point of view. They work slightly differently to us. They work in sectors and land parcels. We just work with fields in our crop rotation. So always create the new crop year from the crop rotation, not the sector. And then you've got a tick box whether you want to define that new crop year, so our 2022, as the current crop year. So we want that because we're moving forward. So we're going to OK to that, and it will create our new crop rotation. Okay, so that was successfully created. So if we OK to that, now you can see the next crops have come over. So I just put in my spring barley and my spring beans. So that's what we wanted. What we can do now is put in the crops in the fields that obviously haven't got a crop in. So if you wanted to do it individually, double click or bring up the bottom half of the screen. Select a field so you've actually got some colour in there. And if we go to this one, we will put that in as oilseed rape. So in the crop tab, the crop drop down, you can go and select your crop. You can put a variety in, you can put a target yield in, and everything else like that. I always say to people that I would leave the planting and the harvest date empty, because what happens with those is when you go and put in either your drilling or your harvest activity, the dates from those activities come into those boxes. So you're kind of saving yourself time instead of going through and saying, well, I'm hoping to go drilling on this date whenever and harvest on this date whenever. I'd leave those blank and let them actually fill in for you. If you want to do more than one field at a time, what you can do is hold down the control key on the keyboard and select as many fields as you like. Go to the grouped records button. You have then got a main crop option on that drop down. That is the one we want because we are putting in the main crop for that crop year. So if we click on that, you get a very similar screen here to the one that you've got in the crop tab of the field. So again, those are going to become oilseed rape. You can again put that information if you want to, but you don't have to. So we're just going to OK to that. while we are on the new crops and things, you can see that 2 of my crops are actually the same colour on the map, which we don't want. So if you have started your new crop rotation and you want to edit the colours of the crops, what you have got on the left hand side where you've got the crop written, you've got that colour box. So if you double click in there, you can change the colour of the crop, you can put a pattern on there, add a colour to that pattern, and then the contour bit relates to the outside of the field. So if we go to that, that's just changed the colour. So you could, once you've kind of got everything cropped, you can change the colours and make the map look as pretty as you would like it to be. So that's how you would crop your fields. You can do them singly or you know, more than one in one go. So that can just save you a little bit of time, which is always handy. So what we're going to have a look at next is if you've gone, you know, 1 year and you have split a field in half, so you can grow 2 crops in each of those splits, but you're not doing the same thing again this year. So we'll just imagine that these 2 were 1 field a couple of years ago, then you planted 2 crops in. So rightly in Geofolia, you would have split that field in half, so you can crop it with 2 different crops. So, but this year we want it back into 1. So what you want to do is highlight 1, again, hold down that control key on the keyboard, which lets you highlight more than 1 field at a time. Click on the other one, so you've got both of them highlighted, and what we're going to do is merge them back together. So if you want to merge 2 or more fields back together, you need to make sure that they are actually touching, because obviously you can't merge 2 fields that are apart. So those 2 are highlighted. We go to the tools button, so that is your mapping tools, as I always say. So if you want to do anything with your fields, that's a really good place to go to. Because you've got more than 1 field highlighted, that merge button is lit up. So if we go and click on merge, what happens now is, because you've made 2 fields into 1, you've just got a new field window come up. So the name you can change if you want to, but we're going to leave that. You can edit any information, but you don't have to. So we're just going to OK to that. So once that has saved and I click off that, it has made those 2 fields go into 1. So that is now going to be farmed as a whole this year. If you were doing a different split, or if you wanted to split a field, highlight the field that you want to work with, go into tools again because you want to work with a field, go to cut, and then within cut you have got 3 options. On the left of each option there is a little picture, so it kind of gives you an idea of what that button does. Cut according to line is the one we're going to have a look at all of these, but we'll start with cut according to line. So that is if you want to kind of split your 2 fields in half, well not half, but however you want them to be split. You can just do a dot on the outside of the field on the outline. I tend to dot just slightly outside of the field because when you're dragging that dot, if you need to, it kind of jumps to these boundary points. So if you click out of the field, you don't get that problem. And then zoom in a bit if you need to, it just gives you a bit more clarity on what you're doing. You can then dot your way through that field and then out the other side. When you zoom out, you'll be able to see those 2 halves have been created, and you can see the different areas of each. If you want to get them, you know, bang on to 2 decimal places of the area, you can just drag and drop those dots to make them exactly right and just make sure you're happy with that split. This is quite a good field anyway, but what I was talking about earlier is if you're dragging this dot, if you're too close to the boundary, it just jumps to those boundary points. So if you drag it out, you've got a lot more control. So I've just read Claire's question. With the RLR number, I don't think it's been fixed yet. So you have got an RLR number field on your or box on your field information. You can put your RLR number in there, but currently it's not pulling through to the next crop year. That is because in another country that use Geofolia, they are using that field or that box for something else, but they're using it for a number that cannot be the same every year, and they cannot have the same number on more than one field. So we're trying to fix that, but there's a few issues with that because one country is using it for one thing and we need it to do the opposite. But yeah, we haven't updated that, I'm afraid, Claire, yet, but we are well aware and we are trying. Okay, so we split that field in half, and now we're happy with the sizes and where it's been split, so we're going to validate. So because you have got that one field that you started with, whenever you split or make a margin or anything like that, basically what you're doing is you're making one field into two. So that's what we've got down here. You can see by clicking on each of these fields, you can see the top picture kind of change, so you know what one you're clicking on. If you want to change these numbers and these names, you can. You can also change the area, so this area on its own is your working area, so that is the area whenever you're adding an activity that is taken through to the activity, so that's the one that you're working on. You obviously can't change the map area without changing what's drawn on the map, so you can't actually change those fields. If you needed to, you could change the crop, but we don't need to for this, and you could also change the variety. So we're happy with all that information. So if we click OK to that, that has updated that field. So that's how you would kind of split a field or something like that. What we will also have a look at, I always try and zoom in on the fields that I'm working on because it just makes it a lot easier to kind of see and work with. So again, highlight the field because we want to work with it. Go to the tools, cut, and then we want to go to cut according to edge. So that is basically a margin that is not the whole way around the field. So we want to start in this corner up here, and as an example, we're going to go to this point here. So the blue line is where Geofolia has selected that margin to go. I actually wanted it to go bottom left. So on the left-hand side, you have got a reverse the cut edge button. So if we click on that, it's just swapped the side that it's highlighted. So that's the one now that we're working with. For this, we don't want to extend the line of cut ticked, but I'm going to leave it there so you can see what it does. And then if we put in a 12-meter margin, or you can put in how many hectares that split or margin is, it's up to you, but we'll just go 12 for this. You can see that it's brought out that margin to 12 meters into the field. And then where we wanted it to stop, it hasn't, because that extend the line of cut option is ticked. So that is extending the line until basically it hits at the edge of the field. But because we've stopped it halfway down, if we take a tick out of there, it stops it dead where you need it to be. So sometimes when you are doing this cut according to edge, you need these two options. Other times you don't, it just depends what you're doing and which Geofolia thinks you're highlighting and things like that. So if we're okay to that, again, you've got this like cutting screen. So you can see that, you know, you've got the different field names. Sometimes I prefer to edit that name. So if you're looking at a list of your fields, you could see like lower east margin, lower east corner, and then you've got lower east, and you know that that is the main field. So I put margin there, but you don't have to at all. That's just personal preference. You can change the crop on here. So we're just going to make that countryside stewardship. You could put a variety, but I don't think we need that for now. So if we're okay to that. That has then saved that margin, and you can see that different color because it's cropped differently. And then just quickly, we'll have a look at cut according to contour. So that is a margin that is the whole way around the field. So if we put in 2 hectares, that's a bit much, we'll put in 1 hectare. So that has worked out the meters for you. So whichever one that you use, it will work out the opposite one. You have always got an undo last action button if you need to. So if you put a dot in the right place or something like that, that can be quite nice. But we don't need that for now, so we're going to save. And I'll just quickly put that to countryside stewardship as well, so it's easier to see. I'll leave that name, I think that's fine. So once that's saved, again, you can see the margin that's the whole way around the field. So you just want to make sure that once you're in that new crop year, you are updating what has actually happened in those fields, and you're cropping obviously what you need to be. The only other thing we'll have a look at today is you've got a boundaries button. You don't often need this, but sometimes if you know a margin's not cut 100% correctly, you might need to just change the outside of the fields. So if we go and click on boundaries, what you can do is you can drag and drop the points that are making up the outside of the field, and you can move those. So we'll just move those up like that. I know that's not a very good real life example, but you get the idea. So yeah, you can drag and drop those dots. If you need to make another dot on that line, just hover over the line. You've got a blue circle. Once you click that circle, it makes another boundary point. So you can always drag that. If you want to delete a boundary point, hover over that point. So you've got that green circle around, and then press the delete key. That gets rid of those points for you. And then if you are working with the boundaries, sometimes it can be quite nice to use this simplify boundaries button. So what that does, like if you've got a straight line and it's got 3 dots or 5 dots in the middle of it, it will take out the ones that it doesn't need. So if you are trying to edit the outsides of your fields, it can just save you a little bit of time. If you did want to delete like a lot of dots at the same time, just hold your finger down on that delete key on the keyboard, and then you would just use your mouse to hover over them, and it would just delete as you went. So if we take that. That simplify boundaries button is quite handy, especially if you've bought your shapefiles in from the RPA, because sometimes they can have a lot of boundary points making up those fields. So that could be quite nice. Then once you kind of are happy with the cropping and things like that, the only other thing to just kind of double check is the costing side of things. So hopefully most of you are using your equipment cost to kind of manage your costings in Geofolia. So that can be found under economics and equipment cost. So what happens when you use your piece of equipment to kind of help with your costings, if you've got that piece of equipment defaulted against a type of activity, when you start running the reports at the end of the year, instead of just seeing like one total figure, you will be able to see, you know, what you've spent on tillage and applications and things like that. So using this equipment cost section, it just makes the end reports look a lot nicer, basically, and they're a lot more helpful to you. So what we're going to do is, you have got a retrieve the cost button up at the top. So if we click on that, it has brought through the costs from 2021. I've only got 2 in my demo data, but if you'd filled everything in the previous year, it would bring all of those forward, and then you would be able to go and, I don't know why our John Deere's down at £50 an hour, but you could then go and change that to whatever it is for this year. And then just make sure you are checking your unit of cost. So obviously if it's done on an hourly basis, you need to start like really being regimented, putting in your hours on your activities. If it's done by hectare, obviously Geofolia's always got that information in there. So that's just a little bit of a safer way of using that cost. And then finally, if we just go back into input prices and stocks, you want to just make sure that the costings have come through. So yeah, retrieve the up stands for unit price. So that's just retrieve the cost again. That has brought those through. So you've got that final stock value. I think that was in anyway, but you can always bring that forward if you haven't got that stock value. And then once you've done that, you're kind of ready to go. You can then start putting in your activities again. And yeah, that's your 2022 crop year ready to go. So I think there is a question, but I think Paul's handling that. So it kind of concludes our webinar. So we've looked at stock, and I'll just have a quick look at equipment. So if you've sold something, sometimes Geofolia won't let you actually delete it. So what you would have done is click on the piece of equipment that you have sold and then use that delete button. If you've used it on an activity, it probably won't let you do that. So you've got a visible in the list tick box for each piece of equipment. If you take a tick out of there, basically what it does, it still leaves that piece of equipment in your list of farm equipment, but when you're going to add activities or run reports or something on your pieces of equipment, it will not show up. So it just kind of starts clearing down your pieces of equipment. So yeah, what we've done today is looked at stock takes. We've looked at how you can use that next crop function, how to start a new crop rotation, how to crop that new crop rotation and update any field margins, field splits or anything like that. And also just how to double check and pull forward your costings into that new year so you can then edit them and move forward. Has anyone got any questions after that? Don't forget that under the help tab at the top, you've got remote access. That takes you to our website where there are videos and PDFs and manuals and all that sort of thing on there to help you as well. So that's another resource that you guys can utilize. Any questions?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, thank you.
We're quite new to it and we haven't put any costings Well, we're on your landmark accounting as well, but we haven't taken anything across. How would you put in prices from last year for chemicals and fertilizer, etc.?
Have you already entered those in?
Yeah, they're all in, but there's no costs against them.
How have you entered them in? Have you put in an invoice or a stock take?
Just in the stock and inputs and into fertilizer, seeds and plants, or PPP. So we haven't got a price, we've just put in what they are, etc.
Okay, that's fine. So what I think you've done is you've gone into inputs, and then on the left-hand side, you've got the types of inputs that you can use within your Geofolia. So that's just kind of like entering those in. Then what you would want to do is, I'd probably put in an invoice. So if you go inputs and then input invoices, you can put in a date. Whether you want to do this, if you've got stuff in stock now, I would probably go back into 2021.
Yeah, I would want to do it for 2021 year. So you just put it in the crop year 2021 unit price.
You can do, yes. So in inputs and input prices and stocks, I've not got it on my table. You've got a unit price column that you can type into. So yeah, you can work your way down there very quickly and put those in. But what you'll need to do is when you run reports, make sure that you check the settings of that report and make sure you're using the unit price as your unit of cost and not the average price.
Right, yeah.
But that's not a problem. That's a good way of doing it. So yeah, run down the unit price, put those in, but you'll have to make sure that you've actually got them in stock to start with, because where you put them in, you're just saying that you're using them in your Geofolia. You're not saying that you've got a certain amount in stock. If that makes sense.
Right. So make sure your stock is high enough to cover it.
Yes, you will have to say that you've got something in stock to be able to put a price against it. So to get it into stock in the first place, because I'm guessing you've got now is under inputs, and then we'll have a look at PPP. So those are your sprays. You've got a list of products in there.
Yeah.
What that doesn't do is say that you've got any stock of those. You're just saying that in your Geofolia, you've just got a list, so you can go and choose that when you're doing a spraying activity, you've got something to choose from. You will have to say that you have bought, or in stock you have got a certain amount. So you can either use an invoice or a stock take, the one that we looked at a bit earlier. So because we looked at that earlier, we'll have a look at an invoice now. So you would make sure that you've got the date right, so the date that you've got those products in stock, check the farm, add a supplier, whether you want to do that accurately or just put in one supplier for everything, you can. If you want an invoice number, you can put it in, but you probably won't need it for that. And then you always want that to be purchased when you're buying in stock, but there is a return option there. So if you are sending stock back, use that return option. Then invoice details, because you have entered your products in, I would definitely use that list button because they will be there for you to choose from. So load up that list, highlight the ones that you have got in stock, okay to that. Then put in the quantity you've got in stock. The unit should kind of come up automatically. And then put in either the unit price or the total. And then it'll be the other one will be worked out for you. So then you're saying that you've got this much in stock at this price. Once you've saved that, it will go into your input prices and stocks page. But just make sure the crop year is right.
Right, thanks. You can also do it from your landmark, from your accounts package, can't you?
You can, but you would have needed the link to be kind of activated, because when you're in Prime, once that link has been activated, you then get 3 extra columns on your like data entry window. So you need to put in what farm it is, the pack type, and the product. So if you haven't been doing that, you won't be able to bring those across.
Yeah, I think they're in. Yeah, they are in. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So once you've done that, I think we'll do. Can I give you a call?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
For the people that don't have the link, it's quite a long process to go through, just how to set it up and things like that, because you'll have to set it up to link them both together, basically.
No, that's fine.
Can I just take down your name, please, because you're down as iPhone?
Ali Martin from WW Martin and Son.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you a call and we can go through that.
Right.
If you've not got it set up, we'll need to set it up first before you can start bringing those in.
Right.
Anyone else got any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask if you want to.
Alice, there's I'm an ex-Pair user, and there's a number of things on Pair that I can't seem to find on Geofolia. One of them is at the stock end, you could balance. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear me. At the end of when you're doing a year end, you could balance out what if you were showing a small amount of product of inputs left at the year end, you could balance that out over the whatever crops had been applied with that. So you ended up with a 0 amount to carry through. If there was nothing in your spray shed or fertilizer store or whatever, you don't want anything to carry through. So you could balance that. But I can't seem to find that.
You won't, because we haven't got one.
All right. Okay.
So that's not in there. What you can do is, in essence, you can manually balance that if you want to. So we've got, oh no, that's not any good. I'm just going to go back to 2021. So in here, so for this product here, clicking on that in the table at the top, you can see that the activity and the invoice affecting that product is at the bottom. So you could double click on that activity and then, cannot work this out in my head. What? Let me just make that 10 litres. That would add it back. Obviously, be careful that you're not going over any approved dose rates. Okay to that. And it will update itself. It has gone over. And then that has cleared it down. So in essence, you can manually do that, or just go in and put in that stock take and 0 that product off.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
But currently, I don't know if it even is a plan, but we have not got a balance button, I'm afraid.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, please, Alice. So certain chemicals only allow you to have one application for a crop. We were spraying a field and we got so that we couldn't carry on because it was too windy. So we stopped. I recorded that spray activity on one day. We went back and we finished the field on the second day. Obviously it throws up all sorts of errors because it says that I've now applied 2 doses of this spray to this one field when you're only allowed to apply 1. Is there any way to override that without going in and changing the figures to say that you can apply more than 1 spray?
Sometimes I find when you get an error in Geofolia, like say if you've gone to add an activity, press OK, you've got an error. Some people will then just cancel out of that and go off and edit things. If you press OK again, it saves that. So you can just OK over those warnings. I don't actually know if we have a look at our activities, because what you can do, so if you've started a field, done part of a field, and then you come back, one spraying activity. What you can do, I don't know if this will actually help with your warning issue, I've never tried it, but say you've done half of this field, you can change the area on that activity. So you could say that you've done 2 hectares. I would put a comment either down here or up on this activity, on the main activity itself, and say only half of this field has been done, come back to that. And then when you do another activity to say that you're finishing that off, you would put the remaining 2 hectares in.
Yeah, that's what I've done, but it still sees it as, even though it's the 2 totals add up to the total of the whole field, obviously it still sees 2 spray operations, and so therefore it throws up the compliance error. But it sounds like there's no way of getting around that.
Not that I know of. I'll have a look into that, but I've not actually tested that, so I'll have a look. But that would be the only thing that I could think of for now.
Thank you very much. Yeah. It's just that it's when you do the compliance check report, obviously it throws up all sorts of errors because it thinks you've sprayed it twice when actually you've just sprayed it once. It's just split over 2 days.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have a look. But yeah, we might be able to do something about that, and maybe like internally, like make sure like the total areas come right before you get that warning or something. But
what I do is, don't worry about the date, just put the times, and then it thinks it's all in one operation, because you've still got the spray in the tank overnight, haven't you? You're just being, you've done it all in one tank load effectively. You've just tried to tell it you've done it in 2 halves. Ignore that bit and just put it all on at once.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
thank you. Thanks, Robert.
It's all right. You get rained off and blown off and all sorts, but you don't actually empty your spray tank and save it. You still carry on the following day or whenever.
Yeah, what actually makes mine slightly worse is that we actually had finished the tank, and then we went on next time we could go, and it had gone from being a pre-em to being something where the crop was coming through, so we actually had a slightly different tank mix as well.
Oh God.
Yes. Yeah.
Start earlier in the morning.
Any other questions from anybody?
I've got a quick one, if that's okay. Slightly complex because we have a home business and a contracting business, so we have 2 stock centres.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way, so at the end of the season, rather than carrying a lot of stock over, I will often sell stock from one business to another.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way of easy doing that in Geofolia so that then when you come to do your stock take at the end, it's right?
I'd love to say yes, but there is no easy way to do that. You would have to, I would probably go in, do a return of an invoice, and then invoice that to your other farm.
Okay.
And then you would add an invoice in the one that the product's coming into, a purchase invoice, and then you would add that product from the other one, and it would go into that stock. There is no, it doesn't automatically move that stock from one to another, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I will add that as a request because I think there are more people that are having more than one farm on Geofolia, so that would be a useful feature to have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions? Paul, is everything all right in the chat? I'm not really reading it.
Yeah, I'm just dealing with one from David. David? David? Alice, can you go to settings and activities for me, please? David, I'm guessing that your spraying activity, if you go to at the bottom, you've got the tab that says description, settings and default values. If you click on the default values tab, you've probably got all 4 operators down as default for the sprayers. So every time you add a spraying activity, it's going to add those 4 employees as the employees that are doing that spraying activity. So if you go into this tab, go to your spraying, go to default values and highlight the ones that don't do the spraying activity, or all of them if you don't want to default anybody, and then just press the red minus to delete those employees as default employees from the activity itself. Thank you, Alice.
Anything else from anybody? If not, thank you all very much for coming. I'm sorry that we've run over, but hopefully you've all found it useful. And hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you.